I'm Heather Hilder-Darling, and this is Let's Talk Property on Radio Reverb 97.2 FM and DAB. I'm happily speaking to my guest today, guest and branch manager and Arla rep for Sussex, James Duffy. James, hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Heather. Yes.
I'm really excited about today's show because instead of talking about lettings, today we're going to be talking about sales, which is another area that you're very experienced in, James. Obviously, everybody knows now I've moved 22 times and still it keeps changing every time I move. But I think it's a really good time for us to think about, I suppose we're casting our minds forward to 2022. And obviously, those people who are thinking about selling their property, they might be thinking, well, I think we might wait till the springtime. And as we know, in sales, there's still an awful lot of paperwork and detail and choosing estate agents. So we're going to be going through that today. So, James, let's start off. Where have you actually sold property previously?
Sussex, in West and East Sussex, Surrey and South London, in a work capacity and also in my own personal life, yeah. And also that's leasehold and freehold. So I've been through that experience, you know, as a client, as a consumer, as a vendor.
And really, the system is pretty much the same. There are no regional differences. We've got to look at England on its own because occasionally there are differences in, for example, Scotland, different regulations in Wales. But what we're doing is we're going to be talking about the English system, and particularly those sellers in East and West Sussex, which are the areas that we cover. Okay, we've all come through a really difficult time with coronavirus and lockdown, and we know that a lot of people have been looking for more green space, possibly moving from a flat to a flat with a balcony or a flat to a property with a garden. It may be a patio garden. It may be even closer perhaps to a park or the seafront where they can go out and get their fresh air. It doesn't matter where you're moving from or to, you still need to get your documents in place. And I know this is one thing that you impress upon everybody so much, James. If you want to move quickly, get your documentation in place. So let's start off with perhaps the freehold properties. What sort of document should people be going through their drawers now for so that it's not last minute?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I do talk about this particular point is because as much as you might want to move in the spring, there is a lot of things you can get organised before you even think about doing a viewing. And people want the transaction to be as less stressful as possible and as swift as possible once they've made a decision. So the documents that you can start to prepare before you even think about doing a viewing are: does you probably have a current EPC, because you'd need to have that to market it. So if it hasn't got an EPC, they're valid for 10 years. So some people would never had an EPC because they haven't moved in 20 years, but some people might have moved in 5 years ago and the EPC might still be valid, it might be expired. So check that, and you might as well get that done because that'd be one job ticked off. Then to look at if you have done any alterations. So if you've done a loft conversion or an extension, have you got all of your planning permission documents to hand to make sure, because people are going to ask for that. So you might as well get all those in one place. The solicitor's going to ask, and a good estate agent would ask before they start marketing it as a fourth bedroom or a downstairs bedroom. Where is the paperwork? Some extensions may have not needed planning permission, but they might have needed building regs. So it depends what you've done, but just look at your paperwork. Another area that people sometimes forget is that if you've replaced your windows, then you'd need a fencer certificate. And if you haven't got a fencer certificate, then you will have to go through retrospective planning permission for different properties and different buildings. So it depends again if you're in a conservation area listed building or just a standard normal freehold property. It will be very individual to your property, but check if you've got all the right paperwork for your windows, because the conveyancers, the buyer probably won't ask, the estate agent may not ask, but definitely when it gets to conveyancing further down the road, when you're in the middle of being under a lot of pressure about trying to find your next property, or talk about viewings on your property that you're trying to go and buy, the last thing you want to be looking for is what happened to the fence certificate. And if you've got any history on your boiler installation, your boiler service, any electrical enhancements that you've done, where are the certificates for all of those? Because although the electric and the gas is not necessarily a requirement to sell it like it is in lettings, the conveyancers and buyers, and maybe even the surveyor, will be saying that they should be checking what happened with this installation, what happened with that upgrade. So you might as well get all that in one place now, so that when you're asked, it's all ready to go. So that's some of the most prominent documents you'd need for freehold. Leasehold is another list of documents which I can go on to, but they're the main documents of freehold I would suggest people start to look for.
And I suppose one of those is ID as well of the legal owners, isn't it? You know, we still get people who haven't got passports, they haven't got driving licenses. So what sort of documents would you suggest that they provide in order to prove the legality of them owning the building?
Yes, I mean, obviously there's a land registry document which you would hope that is up to date, but there are situations where there has been maybe a new person being added to that property while you've been living there, a new partner or a family member's joined the property to help with affordability in some instances. So have you got the right people's names on the title deed, and if there's a mortgage, also how does that translate to the mortgage? In terms of ID, you're quite right, you know, every client is different, and some clients their passports have expired because they don't, so they haven't updated those passports. Some people, I do come across people that don't have a passport or even a photo driving license. I mean, I know it is rare now, but it does happen. So there is a document, which a government document, that gives a list of alternative documents that you can produce, which would be acceptable. And again, if anyone is looking to sell and is struggling with that, speak to a qualified local decent estate agent, or maybe your conveyancer if you've got a sister instructor already, and they can help you. But normally you have to provide two different forms of ID when you can't provide the photo ID.
I've just had a question that shot through my head now. I wonder if my bus pass would actually be okay as ID. I mean, obviously it's got photo ID and they've checked that, but that's something that we need to think about. And it's certainly my rail card as well now, which I've got. Just one thing. A lot of people may have had things like damp work or a new roof put on. Would you expect them to provide their building work guarantees, especially if they were still legal? And can you transfer building work guarantees from one owner to another?
It's that will have to be assessed on an individual basis in terms of whether or not that warranty would be transferable. But in terms of the basic principle of having those that as evidence in terms of the receipts and the confirmation that work has been done, and if it comes with any type of warranty stroke guarantee, then I would have all that to hand, because it would give buyers a reassurance that the property has been maintained, has been looked after, because a lot of people really do not understand what they're looking for when, in terms of remedial works, when they're looking for a property. Obviously you do have people that are in the field, builders, or they have friends that come with them, but generally buyers are not looking at that initially. They're looking at location, they're looking at space, they're looking at, does it work, can they grow in it? And these other bits come to light later on when they have a survey or when they have a solicitor ask the question. So if you can reassure some of those or overcome some of those concerns very early on, let your estate agent know that this work was done 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and here is the paperwork, so that when they do a viewing, if you're not around to share that information, then the estate agent can pass that on to the buyers that are particularly interested, the people that are seriously about making an offer, or when they come back for a second viewing. Those little things will just reassure people. So yes, that's a good thing to, again, have in your folder in preparation for selling. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the folder there, because actually this is quite a lot of admin, isn't it? Making sure you've got all the documents. I know some people would perhaps prefer to scan the documents to their computer, so they've got it all under the Acacia Avenue with all the documents. Others may prefer just to have an A4 folder where they put copies in ready for their conveyancer or their estate agent. And obviously we ask lots of questions of our sellers, the property information questionnaire, and actually they need access to a lot of these documents before they even fill in the property information questionnaire.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that you do really need to be clear on, and I know this isn't relevant for lots of properties, but is really being clear on your boundaries, being clear on which fence you're responsible for. That's, if you've got a garden, then that's really important, because some people have hedges, some people have fencing, some people have shared drives, and what might be the norm for you because you've lived there so long, when you have to actually explain that through a transaction, you've had a change of neighbours since you've lived there. It's just being very clear, because you're going to be asked that question, not necessarily on the viewing, unless there's something strange going on with the boundary, but definitely when you start to fill in, as you said earlier, Heather, the property information forms, they want to know that. So before you even get to the stage about worrying about a buyer, worrying about negotiating, worrying about tidying up, let's just get all that clarified and refresh your memory of actually where the boundaries are and what is actually, because some people have odd bits of parcels of land, so they might have a garage, slightly round the corner down an access road, and your title plan, when you check land registry, will have all that, mapped out in red, and if it doesn't, then you should question that. But it should do if you purchase something reasonably recent and the property is registered, because you have the whole scenario as well. If someone's had the property for a long time, it might even be unregistered, which again you need to be getting that sorted out before you even think about trying to agree a sell, because that will just delay the whole process if you haven't got that sorted. That's a whole nother conversation. But that is why it's important that you do investigate your title and your boundary. Don't leave it until you're under pressure.
No, I mean, the last thing you want when you think you're busy going along nice and confidently, and suddenly you end up with a boundary dispute or something. I mean, that's the last thing you need. So absolutely right. All that list of documents, obviously, we've written a blog about it. You can find it on Callaway's blogs. So thank you for that, James. But I think it's nice to hear why estate agents, surveyors, and actually all the other parties who are involved with a sale need to have these. You think, well, why do they need that? Well, it's all for a specific reason, to make sure that, go on.
I mean, a specific example there is that, you live in a semi-detached house, and there's two, that means two of you are joining, and you've lived there 15 years, and your neighbours lived there 20 years, and you've both got you've had a brilliant relationship through those 15, 20 years, however you lived there. And throughout that period, one or both of you have extended, and you see more and more now that people are extending right up to their boundary wall, and sometimes they're actually even adjoining. So there should be a party wall agreement officially to make that right. Now, because you're so friendly and you all get on and everyone trusts each other, some people don't go down that formality route, and because they've got this agreement. But when it comes to selling and getting through the surveyor and the conveyancing, there's going to be a lot of questions around that. So it's just being aware of how you documented that, and what the architect's advice was at the time when it was all being done, to prove that it was all done okay. So those little things that you just think, oh, we're happy with it, we were fine with it. There'll be another set of eyes on it. So just get all the emails out, all the letters out, all the plans out, so you can refresh your mind, because you do forget there's just so much going on. So that's why it's important to plan way before you put it on the market, because then you can really talk to the estate agent or the buyers or the conveyancer with confidence that you've got all your history around this subject.
Correct. So if we move on to leasehold now, I mean, obviously a lot of what you've just explained about for the freehold properties still holds true, very much so, but there are additional documents that will be needed in a leasehold sale.
Yeah.
Can you go through those for us in not too much detail, but enough so that it pricks up people's ears if they're selling, for example, a flat? Let's see what the differences are.
Yeah, so in addition to the things I mentioned earlier, the other key documents you need to be looking for is getting a copy of your lease, specifically to see how many years are remaining on the lease, because that will be a question that is asked by everybody that's then going to view it, the estate agent, etc. The mortgage company for the new buyer will be asking that. Get all your paperwork out about your service charges, what you paid up until now, and what your latest service charge demand is, what's for the property. If you pay ground rent, what your ground rent charges are, and also any documentation in relation to any major works that you've been notified on that your property is going to have to contribute to, but also any major works that may have just recently been completed. So again, you can show that there's been a cycle of work which is in line with the terms of the lease, to show that the work's been done in the last year, 18 months. So then the buyers know that actually they're probably not going to be asked to do that particular type of work very, very soon. There might be other work, but it shows that the building's being managed effectively, and that it's being kept to a good standard. So it's the lease, the ground rent, the service charge, major works that are predicted or major works that have just been done. And at the moment, which is a very important subject, depends on the type of building that you live in. Obviously, anything regarding the fire risk assessment and also cladding, you need to be very aware of how that relates to your building, because you will be asked that question.
Sometimes, obviously, if people go to view a property and a leasehold property, say they've gone to see a block of flats, and they turn up and everything looks absolutely fine. Then maybe they return a couple of weeks later and there's a load of scaffolding up. There's nothing worse than thinking, oh my goodness, what's the scaffolding up for? And you could be jumping to the wrong conclusion, thinking there's something wrong, when actually they're putting something right that's already been accounted for in the service charges.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I always say to people, within reason, it's a good thing that maintenance is going on, because obviously the property is being maintained, and you hopefully shouldn't have. Then the bills should be a little bit more spread out, as opposed to hitting you in one go. Obviously, when it depends on the size of the building, and there are things that crop up that people can't control. But all that information is you have to have at your fingertips. Yeah.
And I think one of the other items that I would be particularly interested in if I was buying a property in Brighton is, does it have its own parking space, or is there residence parking? Can I get a parking permit easily and quickly on the road outside? Because again, there have been delays, and there can be arguments between neighbours if you're parking in the wrong places, and you're certainly going to upset your management company if you don't park in the right space. So it's well worth being absolutely sure and finding out which is allocated and which isn't.
In addition to these particular documents, whether they be leasehold or freehold, I would say that if you have a mortgage on the property, you need to be looking at your mortgage offer, because you might have a early redemption figure that you have to pay because you're looking to move or change your product early. So speak to your financial advisor, your lender, or your mortgage advisor early on as well, to make sure that you are able to make the move that you want to move without there being penalties, and also it being affordable. So that would also be one of my early tasks in this whole process. If you don't have a mortgage or you don't need one, then you don't need to consider that. But if you've got that in place, you need to look at that.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, budgeting for all of this, it's an expensive business to move when you add up all the fees. And if you've under budgeted, you could be left with a deep hole in your pocket, and maybe going to the bank of mum and dad to fill that gap, or it can be a little difficult, can't it? Now, obviously, we're nearly in December now, and house predictions for 2022. Shall we just take a quick look at what some of the experts are saying? We might have our own views, but, you know, the big portals, property firms like Zoopla, the Savills of this world, who've all, you know, they do a lot of forecasting for properties. They've got their own research departments, Rightmove as well. So, for example, Zoopla predicts that prices will grow by 3% across 2022. It has been a record year for sales transactions this year for various reasons. Obviously, the stamp duty holiday, which ended at the end of September, that was like Christmas come early for a lot of people, wasn't it? Because they managed to perhaps put more money towards the price of the property. Maybe they were intending to do renovations further down the line, but could then refurbish quicker because they had that extra money. But of course, the stamp duty holiday has gone for the time being. And do you think a 3% growth is realistic, or do you think there's anything else coming at us like a steam train, like Santa's steam train, that possibly is going to scupper that 3%? It sort of fits in with the inflation rate, doesn't it?
Yes.
But, yeah.
I think it's, who knows? I mean, we've been thrown so many curveballs over the last 18 months, and there is so many policy decisions that the government seems to be getting involved with and trying to implement, and that has an impact on, you know, people's confidence in the market generally. But I think that particular figure is probably not far off, in my opinion, based on what's going on now with activity, based on supply and demand, based on the fact that yes, we're not going to have this continued benefit of the stamp duty that's now ended. So yes, I would say that's probably
about right, yeah.
About right, yeah.
Radio Reverb.
Making music night and day.
97.2 FM.
Well, I think Savills, again, they have a similar forecast, and they're predicting an increase by 3.5% in 2022 due to robust economic growth and a shortage of homes. And I think this is one of the things that we get concerned about, this shortage of homes, and particularly down here on the coast, where obviously we've got the Channel, we've got the promenade, we've got green spaces as well, and we know that we get a lot of London purchases anyway. Do you think this is going to have an even bigger effect on the supply and demand, which often is the reason why prices go up? And if we could get more houses built, that should be relaxed a little bit.
Yes, I mean, it is, you know, it's just basically supply and demand. I mean, I think I often say I think there is a lot of properties being built. I mean, I think if you ask a lot of people when they drive around, there seems to be, I mean, you know, maybe not specifically right by the coast, obviously for various obvious reasons, but as you drive around the southeast, there is quite a lot of building going on, but it's nowhere near enough when you look at the figures and the projections that everyone makes about what we need. So yeah, and people are living differently as well. I mean, there are, you know, I've seen a trend of families coming together because of the pandemic, where they want to, you know, have bigger properties where more, you know, people can combine families more so than ever before. So there's been a drive for these bigger properties, which people are prepared to pay a bit more of a premium for, because they're selling two houses to come to one, and it's going to benefit them long term. So there's a whole change about how people are buying, why they're buying, and obviously the additional space for home working as well, because loads of sectors are working from home. So I don't think we're ever going to have to build the numbers that they project. They say that we need. We are an island.
We are an island.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we are an island. Now, obviously, we've talked about people wanting garden and open space, but equally, a lot of people want pet-friendly places, and quite clearly, with a garden or open space, you have potentially room for a pet, etc. But the other thing that buyers want is, and a lot of this is down to lockdown. I think we've all reassessed our needs since lockdown and having worked from home. And obviously with the continued introduction of Actually, some people have never returned to work, have they? They're
No,
still
there's loads of
working
people
from
that haven't, yeah.
home. We obviously need really, really good internet connections, broadband connections as well. So this is where I'd like to introduce, from a recording yesterday, Saira Khan, who is a businesswoman, broadcaster and author. And she was talking about Brits calling out poor internet because the pandemic has exacerbated the need for it to be viewed as a key utility. Now, obviously, we generally recall our utilities as water, electric and gas, but what do you think about the internet and broadband, James? Would you say that's a utility as well nowadays?
Yes, and it's definitely high up on people's question list, and they more and more, particularly the first-time buyers who are not necessarily working from home, but they want the internet a lot. They've been asking. We see it a lot more in lettings because they're worried about whether or not they can have different providers put in that they would want. That's why they ask that. But within sales, with people that are setting up home offices, then they are checking the who are the best suppliers and what the options are for the area. So people, it's high up there on people's list, and they want to shop around for value for money, obviously, as well. Yeah.
You're listening to Let's Talk Property with Heather Hilder-Darling and James Duffy on Radio Reverb 97.2 FM. And I'm now going to introduce Saira Khan, businesswoman, broadcaster and author, talking about internet.
Hi, Heather.
Hello, Saira. How are you?
I'm very well, my darling. You sound like a very lovely, bubbly person. I love your energy. I can feel it through the internet, the broadband.
Well, I think this is the whole point, Saira. I mean, we're meeting via the magic of the internet today, aren't we? So,
exactly.
you know, it really is the sort of the thing that we should be talking about because we rely on it so much nowadays, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if there's something, you know, that we all learned from the pandemic coming out is that our lives have changed and the internet isn't just nice to have. It's a crucial part of our life, just like, you know, gas, electric and water. It's a crucial utility.
But the problem is a lot of us have suffered poor internet. And did we used to take the internet for granted, do you think, pre-lockdown? And suddenly all the lockdown, it changed our lives upside down, roundabout, and in so many ways. Do you think that's what's had the effect of making us realise how much we depend on internet?
Well, that's a really good question. I think, let me just put a few things into perspective. So, as a country, we're ranked the 48th in the world for having good internet connectivity. That's not great. So we really have to improve it. And a new research from City Fibre, and they are a company that provide ultra-fast, reliable, future-proof broadband 5G services to homes, businesses. Their research showed that during the pandemic, 80% of us experienced poor connectivity. And I think the pandemic actually made us become more dependent. We couldn't go out shopping. We couldn't go out, you know, meeting people face to face. So what did we do? We had to rely on our digital products and broadband. So we've actually put more pressure on those broadband services because we need reliable connectivity. We need good connectivity. And so it's made us realize, oh my goodness, you know, when I've got two kids at home, you know, homeschooling, I've got my husband or my partner working from home, I'm working from home on my internet, I've just realized I've got really rubbish reliability. It kind of conks out and I just can't afford to do that. But Heather, I just want to say good news. I am the bearer of good news today. And what I want to say to people, and this is the scientific bit, most people don't realize that our sort of digital data, a lot of us are using kind of the old telephone lines, which are made of copper wire. And this is the science bit, you know, that copper wire transmits data using electrical pulses. And what we need as a country is to move to a full fiber network. And full fiber, that uses light, and light is faster. So it transmits more data. So more people in the home can use their devices without it becoming unreliable. And you know, you have that peace of mind that you can get your work done, you can finish your conversation, you can get things done without it conking out in the middle.
I think that's great news. I've had my own experience of copper wire with internet where I work. excuse me, in Worthing, and often I'm in Brighton and Hove as well, which doesn't come out particularly well over the pandemic. I mean, obviously in Brighton and Hove, we've got lots and lots of old buildings, tall buildings, and very often we say, oh, it must be because of the tall buildings. And then you think, well, it can't be, because actually a lot of the copper wiring and the fibres are underneath the pavement. So, you know, we have to suffer a lot of pavements being up, disruption, etc., to travel. But I think when you go back to what we now use the internet for, we've possibly forgotten. I mean, as a business, you know, the banking, the communication, emails, keeping in touch, social media with family and friends, research, as you said, with children doing research online for school, etc. We really can't do without it, can we?
We absolutely can't. And you missed a really big one there, Heather, dating. What about all those people who try to keep their romance going? And imagine halfway through if your internet conked out. I mean, that'd be so depressing, wouldn't it?
I think my husband of 36 years would have something to say if I started dating.
But I've got quite a few friends who were, you know, were doing all of that internet dating, and you know, it's a big part of our life. But what I think people need to really appreciate is that, you know, this rollout of the full fibre broadband, it is coming across the country, and you just need to know if it's in your area. And I think what's really important as well is for people to realise, and this is the good news, is just like you can switch your gas, electric, and water, you can also switch from your old network to a full fibre network if it is accessible in your area. And because Good Friday is coming up, there are going to be hopefully some good deals for people to help them get started. And I think that's really, really important. But, you know, it is, look, I think, you know, if your gas went, you know, AWOL, or your electric and water, there'd be an outcry, wouldn't there? But, you know, if your internet goes down, we just moan and get stressed, and it's just infuriating. But I actually think it's just as important as all those other utilities, and it should be something that, you know, as a country we take really importantly, and that everybody has that accessibility. And I know that City Fibre have got a £4 billion rollout. They're trying to get the full fibre broadband out to a third of the UK by 2025. So many companies are, you know, looking really investing heavily in this technology.
Well, I think that's absolutely what needs to happen. But equally, if it's a utility, how often do we give thought to our electrics or our gas unless things start going wrong? And of course, there's been a lot in the news recently about utility providers going bust and things not working out. But personally, I don't know my kilobits from my gigabits. And, you know, why should I really? But what we need to know is the speed that things are happening. I mean, when I'm in front of my computer, sometimes I've got like 20 windows open, you know, trying to go from one to another. And you know, when people say to me, well, what's your download speed? I'm thinking, well, what is my download speed? So
well, Heather, do you know what? I don't think as consumers we need to get that scientific about it. I'll tell you what, I mean, during lockdown, Heather, I had 2 kids at home being homeschooled on their laptops for, you know, over 8 hours a day. Then I've got me working from home. I only run my business online. My husband was forced to work online from home. So we had 4 devices going on for more than 8 hours a day. And I do have full fibre network, and I can honestly tell you, hand on my heart, and this is why I'm so passionate for people to understand what it is, to future-proof themselves. I can tell you that we had very, very little problems with connectivity and, you know, kind of mishaps. And I don't think as well that this should be for the privilege, you know, for people who are internet savvy. It's really important for everybody to have this access and for people to help each other. And what's really important, and I think this research by City Fibre, you know, 80% of us experience a loss of connectivity. And what people also said in this research is like, look, I'm not bothered about how fast it is. I just want it to be reliable. I want it to work when I want it to work. And I think that's really key. So it's important for people to understand that full fibre broadband, it gives you that reliability. It's the future. Try and invest in it. Find out when it's coming to your area. If you've already got it, take advantage of it, and just take that stress out. Because look, you know, the internet, it's not something that's going to happen. It's here and it's moving really, really quickly, and it's important for us not to get ignorant and left behiund.
Do you know what, Saira? For somebody who started off with the dial-up, the internet is an absolute blessing, I can tell you. I don't
now
know.
we're really showing our age, because I know that as well. I know, Heather. But you know what, Heather? You do sometimes think, how the hell did we ever live without it? And, you know, as human beings, we do want things quicker. We do want things more reliable. And so we're actually putting the pressure on these companies to get us this technology as soon as possible. So please do go to the cityfibre.com website to see if it is in your area. I do know that I think in Brighton it's kind of in fact, you know what, your city, a city where I went to university actually, so my second home, I would say, it was sort of at the top of the list when it came to internet struggles over the pandemic, and lots of hours lost due to poor connectivity. So really important for people in Brighton to kind of be on speed with it, and to find out when it's coming, if it's available in certain areas, etc.
Yes, I mean, we can't afford to lose productivity, can we? I mean, when we're talking about millions of hours of unreliable connection, there's a cost to all of that. And it just makes work life absolutely impossible to carry on.
It does. And you know what? We talk about mental health, and these little things really do affect your mental health. I mean, they did. I mean, City Fibre did this research. I'm just going to give you a fact here. Well, it's their research. They said that poor connectivity cost our nation around 416 million productive hours. That is, you know, I mean, I can't even get my head around that, but that is, you know, probably a lot of small businesses losing money, you know, people not seeing, you know, customers, etc., 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 and it all mounts up, and we just can't afford to lose money like that. And hopefully, you know, if our country, and I know our country is investing in it, it's important for everybody to take advantage. And I always think, Heather, there are people who are very savvy, they get on with it, they're really good, but you know, we need to help each other to understand what full fibre is, and make sure that our, you know, community, our close friends and family are accessing it if they can, so that they're not missing out.
So I think you told me at the beginning we were like 48th in the world. Where do you think we should be as a nation, or as a nation that really has lots and lots of small businesses?
Well, Heather, look, we should be number one, because we are a big country leading the way in e-commerce, which is businesses run on the internet. So if we're the leading, one of the leading countries for e-commerce, then we should be one of the leading countries for connectivity, for broadband. And for me, I mean, you know, every single home should have access to good, reliable connectivity. If I was Prime Minister tomorrow, Heather, I would be laying cable up and down this country to make sure that people are connected through the internet. It's so important. And look, I'm passionate about it because I run my business. I've got 2 children, you know, my husband's got a business, and it's a lifeline. It's a lifeline. And you know, it's important for everybody to have that privilege and to have that to resource available to them. So we must really put the pressure on for people to get better connectivity.
Do you know what? I couldn't agree more with you. I think you've spoken everything that I've been thinking about over the months, and all the downtime that we've had as businesses during lockdown, you know, the frustrations about, oh, I can't get on the internet. Just reboot the computer and it'll work, and all these little bits and pieces. But finally, Saira, can I just ask, you know, if you were to speak to the Prime Minister today and give him your top tip for getting us all on the full fibre internet, what would you say to him?
I would say to the Prime Minister, look, you have got a lot of independent companies out there trying to put this full fibre infrastructure, you know, in the ground for us to be connected. Give them your support, give them the go ahead, make it easy for them to make this happen, and support them. That's what I would say, because, you know, for me, a future Prime Minister, a forward thinking Prime Minister, a Prime Minister that is future-proofing his company, for me, full fibre network broadband in this country is a priority, and is part of how we, will develop economically and will affect our productivity.
And I think on that note, so say all of us mums, business women.
100%. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me on Let's Talk Property today, Saira.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you so much.
Come aboard, sister.
Radio Reverb.
I don't know, James, I get confused about all this broadband speed, etc. But obviously, a lot of people looking for a new property will want the speed, especially if they're looking perhaps for accommodation where they can have an office study, maybe somewhere for the children to do their homework. And if you've got 3 or 4 people on the internet all at once, obviously the speeds are really, really important. The last thing you want when you're trying to work from home or when the children are doing their homework is the broadband to keep going down. Do you think this is viable to get a proper fast band? I know we're not technical, but do you think this trend is going to continue, or is it just one of those things that will disappear in a few years' time?
I think it's going to continue. I think the demand is there. The consumer's going to drive it. There's just so much technology from even people with their not so much work related, but for their pleasure, their enjoyment, from downloading and streaming and games. And so, yeah, I just don't see that easing up at all. And the tech suppliers and the broadband suppliers are going to just have to keep improving, because the consumer demands more and wants more and expects more. Yeah.
Well, I think even in our industry, we're expecting to do more online, more digitally, etc. I'm not sure if we'll ever get to the point where we're doing the e-commerce bit, but obviously a lot of businesses are now based on e-commerce, so we will need very, very reliable broadband connection. And it's interesting, when I think not long ago they were putting in, it was copper. It used to be copper, right. And now it's fiber options that you just think, gosh, just in that short time since the internet really came to play in the 1980s, how quickly things have moved from dial-up to virtually online all the time, and you can access the internet at any time of day.
Even phone lines now, aren't they?
Yes.
They're going across internet, providing broadband lines. Some telephone lines now, they ask you, do you need it for any particular medical reasons to have a hardwired telephone line? If not, you can't have it on a broadband line. It's all being re-looked at, and just for the consumers driving it. And that's the way we're going. Yeah.
Well, just look at the way viewings have been conducted over the last 18 months. We've had to go to video viewings, for example. Do you think people miss going to an open house viewing where they physically go to a property? Okay, when things start opening up again, we probably can do open house viewings, but is this something that's here to stay as well? So perhaps they'll look at the video before they go to the open house physical viewing, because actually that'll save them time if they don't like the look of it to start with.
I think the video element is here to stay. I think it's going to be a mixture of how it's used. I think people that are travelling distances to change areas, the video is useful for initial view to see if they really want to make that trip to do it. For lettings, it's used more. There's less of a risk that people see that. Obviously, they are recommended to see it before they actually do commit, but they tend to be happy with that. But for someone buying a house, it's such a big purchase, it's such a commitment. I find that most people say, yeah, I'm happy to look at the video just for an initial feel. And if they rule it out completely, then because of something they don't like, then that deals with that. But then they say, right, when can I actually see it? And I think that's the right thing to do. And so I think there's going to be a mix, and it depends on whether someone's buying it to living or investment and what their driving factors are. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to selling your property, obviously we always suggest that property presentation is extremely important. But occasionally, if you've got a property that's really old and needs doing up, there's not really any purpose in making it look nice when obviously it's a different type of buyer that comes along, maybe an investor or somebody who's happy to refurbish, even knock down and rebuild. But it's interesting that, when a survey amongst estate agents identified certain aspects of property presentation that they think is really important when selling. And you might be a bit surprised at these stats, James. So 77% said that decluttering the interior was among their top 3 tips. 68% included a thorough interior clean, and 48% highlighted the need to tidy the garden. I would be surprised if that figure has gone up now, because obviously the gardens and the outside space have become really, really important. And again, the 40% suggested neutral decoration, 35% a fresh coat of exterior paint, and 24% felt a new kitchen or bathroom was important. From my perspective, they're not really the sorts of things that I feel are important, because if you're going to change them, you'll have put it in your budget and you will decide to go and perhaps buy a bathroom or a kitchen when the sales are on and do all the change. A lot of people really want ready-made homes, don't they? Do you think that's a sort of the right percentages, or is there something else that you would have thought on that list that maybe was more important, particularly in view of the last 18 months where things have been all topsy-turvy?
Yeah, I think the percentages, obviously, you could debate all day long. I think I agree with you. The garden may now feature a little bit higher up in what maybe you should do to make that more of a feature. One of the areas that I think, and I say to clients about, is that when you live somewhere for 5, 10, 15 years, you use the house how you want to use the house. But actually that means sometimes you're using rooms that not how they naturally would be used or would flow for a conventional house. There's some people who have a second reception or a third reception might have changed it into a home office, but not fully kitted out as a home office, like a temporary home office, or they might have made it another bedroom, occasional bedroom. What I say to people is, part of organising yourself for selling is that how is this house now going to flow for someone that wants to come in and view it? Try to remove your sort of own view of how you use it, and capitalise on, if it is that it can be used for a proper 4th bedroom that could add value to your house and make it, more of a bedroom. If it is a home office and it flows correctly, it's not like a door coming off of the lounge, then that is a natural progression. Then just really think about how the house flows and speak to your agent and get some advice about what really people are looking for in that particular area that will add value. And actually, without spending too much money, just rethink that you're going to be moving out. So as part of decluttering, think about how can I present this to get the best value for money for my target market.
Yes, I mean, you can do quite a lot with not very much money if you're trying to freshen up your property. Although it has to be said that materials and things like wood and paint have their prices have escalated since July. And what you might have said, oh well, if I just buy £500 worth of paint and refresh a couple of rooms, it's likely to be a bit more now. But again, I think, the estate agent can very often advise what you can do to make it more presentable. It's very difficult, actually, because it is somebody's home and you don't want to criticize, but equally, you've got to be able to present it to lots of different, motivated buyers and hope that they will see beyond, because not everybody can visualize what a home could look like. And I suppose this is where the floor plans are really quite important. You can look at floor plans and visualize perhaps what walls could come down to make a room more usable, more family friendly perhaps, or maybe put in a wall that's previously been taken out because you need that extra room for something else. I think it's been quite amazing how many people have retreated to their bedrooms as studies during lockdown. And of course, when there's little children at home dashing through the doors, you almost need a lock on those doors to stop them charging through, don't you? But that's actually been quite a sweet side of lockdown. So I suppose what I would like to do now, just as we go through the last minutes of our Let's Talk Property show today, is just think about if you're selling and you want to sell next year, you still have time now to get your house in order. So, James, you've already been through all the documentation that people should be gathering together for when the time is right. Rightmove actually says that a lot of people start looking on Boxing Day. I don't know whether that's too many mince pies and Christmas pud that makes them retreat to their home office to look on the internet for properties. But, you know, I think we're expecting a similar amount this year. And let's be honest, conveyancing searches are taking a lot longer. So if people are considering moving because their children are going to a new school, or maybe somebody's got a new job, or they want to be closer to friends and family, now is a good time to be thinking about it and perhaps take your mind off all the Christmas stuff that goes on. But when we get beyond that, obviously we just talked about presentation. So the thing is, you want your property to be visible on the internet, you want it to be visible on social media, you want your agents to have buyers that are ready to proceed. But I think the being visible again is all about floor plans, photography, videos, and being viewed in the day. Don't forget, if you're having your photographs done now, before you put your lights up, some people may already be putting their Christmas lights up. Once we get past Christmas and the 12 days after Christmas, it will make the photographs look quite dated. Although, you know, people may be going in for viewings while the Christmas lights and the decorations are up. It might give them a nice cozy feeling of going, oh, just imagine if next year this is what our Christmas is going to be like coming into this property. Viewing in the daylight, you know, properties that are photographed in the snow could look very pretty and cottagey and everything. But once the snow has melted and it's just a load of slush, it's not quite the same, is it?
No.
I also think, you know, sellers have to be motivated to sell. It's all very well just saying, oh, let's just have a go. Do you not agree that you need a lot of commitment from sellers, because actually it can come across that they're not particularly motivated to sell?
Yeah, I mean, there are all different reasons why. Unfortunately, there are different reasons why people are selling. It's not always happy reasons, and so you have to manage that side of the process. I mean, yes, it is sometimes about people are moving on to bigger and more exciting and better things, but other people are moving because their circumstances have put in front of them that they have to do it. But all I would say, regardless of whatever category a seller falls into, if you are definitely going to have to move, you need to put your seller's hat on, and you need to think about, I'm moving out of this property and I need to get not only my paperwork in order, but I need to get the house in order, and I need to have the right people around me, whether that includes an estate agent that you can really talk to and build a relationship with and trust. If you need financing, a mortgage advisor or a conveyancer you need. And the earlier you engage with them based on recommendations, the easier, it's not going to be completely easy, but the easier it will be for you to feel a bit more comfortable with the decisions you make as you go along the road, because unfortunately it will be difficult, it will be stressful, and you need to just try and get some of these more difficult things out of the way. But you've got to go into selling mode. You've got to be motivated, as you say, as a seller. You've got to, you know, if you're not sure, or you're just putting your toe in the water, there is quite a bit of work now to do just to put your toe in the water. So you need to do a bit of fact finding before you do that.
But actually, with a lot of these online valuations, obviously sellers can find out beforehand what their property's worth and maybe look at an area that they're thinking of moving to. So that's a bit of the pre-preparation before they even start talking to an estate agent, because the online valuations give them an idea as to what their property's worth from historic sales. But what they don't tell you is what the demand is for that particular type of property, whereas an estate agent will be able to tell them particularly from the how many inquiries are they getting for a particular type of property, which is a surefire way of saying, yes, there is a demand for your type of property. So again, be photogenic, not obviously not the house sellers, but we want the house to be photogenic. And by saying photogenic, I think it's all those things that we spoke about earlier on, the decluttering, the making sure that people can wander in and feel that they can have a look round and be taken through what storage there is, what garden space there is. Is there storage in the garage? Could that perhaps be made into another room, a double garage, whatever it is? And then really it's all about being ready, be ready to go, so that when you go to your estate agent, what they really want to know is that you are serious about selling, because then they can get their skates on and start doing everything they need to do. Is there anything you would like to add to that, James?
I think we've covered quite a lot of what I would say to anybody, that asks me in my day-to-day work, and also the extended friends and family. I give the consistent approach that it's all about preparing and getting all the right things in place from a financial perspective to a document perspective, and it goes on from there. But you can't replace local knowledge from your relevant professionals. You can only get so much online, because there could be a unique element to your road, to your property. There could be a reason why people are wanting to pay more, why there's a better demand. There could have been something going on with the schools, with Ofsted, and all those things that local people would know and be able to add value. So, do talk to local professionals and local experts, because you might find that they just completely give you peace of mind with things that you're worrying about. You don't need to worry about. I mean, some people worry about things that you don't need to worry about when you're going to market a property. There's plenty to worry about, but the things that some people worry about are just not, you don't need to worry about it. You'd be surprised what you could probably park, and focus on the things that are going to cause you a headache if you don't get them right. So just start building that relationship leading up to, what your end goal is. That's my
I think what we say is, if people wanted to start moving in the springtime, they really need to start thinking about it probably 3 to 4 months prior to that date. So Boxing Day isn't too far removed from what needs to be done, but maybe they can take a little bit of a break between Christmas and New Year. Thank you for joining me, Heather Hilder-Darling, on Let's Talk Property, sponsored by Callaway's Estate Agents.
It's a house thing. It's a house thing.